It's Front Row MMA. We're here in the Clarion Hotel, UFC Stockholm Story versus Nelson, and we're joined by the new voice of the Octagon, Andy Friedlander. That's the first question I have to ask because, of course, people will automatically make a comparison between Mr. Buffer.
We don't compare.
Wonderful. Did that happen to start with, though? Was there that kind of, there's a different voice, we want Mike? Did you have to put up with that?
The answer is yes, but I think that's because Bruce and, we met in Vegas and he was very supportive and continues to be, but Bruce is Bruce and has been doing it for 12 years. From when I started watching the sport, Bruce was the guy in the octagon. When you look at all the classic fights, Bruce is the man in the octagon. So he's a key part. He is in the veins of the sport. So it's a difficult challenge. But then the other part is because we're growing the European office, because we're having more European events, the understanding was not only can Bruce not make every event because physically he can't move around. We've got Halifax going on this weekend in Canada and here in Stockholm. So there needs to be another person. And I'm not trying to copy him, but I'd love to think I was emulating his success. But hey, I'm 6 or 7 events in. He's 600 or 700 events in.
When the job was offered, and I'll ask about that in a little bit, but did you have to think, man, I've got some shoes to fill, or was it a case of, no, I'm going to take this by the scruff of the neck and make it mine?
100% make it mine. And again, not to knock Bruce, but what he does is, okay, if you were to take Bruce now and audition him for the UFC, off the bat, not having met him before, you wouldn't employ him. It's because he's grown up with it and become the sport that you can't do without him. You can't live without him in American events. So I was never going in with an act. I do what I do, and I think in respect to the fans, I also don't want to come in and try and take something away from the sport. I would rather give something to the sport in the very, very small contribution I make. Let's not be uncertain here. I don't cut weight. I don't train for months in a camp. I don't spend time away from my family other than fight weekends, and I certainly don't get kicked in the face. So, my small part, I hope, is bringing to the event, not taking away.
Can you remember when you got that phone call, and sort of what were the events of the day, and what went through your head?
I'd love to say I was sat there in a lounger with a martini. It was 3:00 in the afternoon. No, look. I knew some people at BT Sport who put me in touch with the UFC directly, and the moment I even knew there was an opportunity, I was adamant that I wanted to give it a good crack. I don't know who else they were seeing. I didn't know whether they wanted a US person to fill in, so I made sure that I knew what I was going in to talk about. A friend of mine did some artwork about the kind of clothes that person might wear in Europe. I'd gone and studied Bruce and what he did and looked at how the nuances for a different market might work. So at no point, unfortunately, was there a phone call out of the blue to say, you're hired. It was more the opportunity was there, and I went out and I took it. And
so no running around the kitchen screaming, I've got the UFC job then?
Well, at the point that I actually signed the contract, yes. But leading up to that, you guys know as fans, I'd done boxing before, I'd emceed boxing events, I've emceed football, rugby, Champions League finals. Yes. There's just no equivalent when it comes to sports than MMA, and there's no equivalent to the UFC.
What is it about MMA that made you, and how long ago did you fall in love with it? Were you sort of a closet, sort of, I watched Gracie, in UFC 1, or where did you start your relationship?
So, 1989 was Tyson Bruno, and that was the first time, so I would have been 15, that was the first time I got up at 3:00 in the morning to watch a fight. So that was a boxing thing. And from there, very much followed through the American heavyweight scene of, I guess it was the late 80s and into the 90s. And then when I started kind of hearing about mixed martial arts, I didn't watch, I'm not going to claim that I was watching UFC 1 when it happened, but I was your YouTube kind of guy, well, in fact just pre-YouTube, when I was hearing about, and the kind of fight DVDs get circulated, and you're understanding about clips getting sent around, and watching the early matchups between and some of the early K1 as well, and so I guess they're filming some strange things. cameras everywhere. But I guess the fight world has descended on Stockholm. So yeah, I would say probably 03, 04. So you look back at your classic kind of trilogies, your light heavy, Tito, Rich Franklin, your early Rampage, Chuck. Yeah, Chuck Liddell. I mean, come on. He's kind of got us all hooked, really.
A lot of people that sort of came to the sport, or certainly a lot of people who were involved in other combat sports, boxing especially, there was a real, well, I can remember Frank Warren when, the brawl in the Albert Hall came to, and he was all over the bad publicity. We know Gareth Davis, and he was kind of one of the mainstream media guys to give it a shout. What was it about the sport that you fell in love with?
So I'm going to steal a phrase from Bruce Buffer in his book, which if you haven't read, it's called It's Time, his 360-degree view of the octagon. There we go, Bruce. But he uses a great line, which is, compared to boxing, it's twice the pain in half the time. And in a way, that's absolutely true, that that these guys are going in there to fight, to have as much action as possible. That's what the performance of the knife bonuses are lined up to do. I also don't think that there are many A, badly matched fights, but B, fighters who aren't at the standard the UFC expects. So you don't get boring 12-round boxing kind of jabber move. They go for it. And I think that is maybe for the attention deficit disorder of us all, a massively compelling proposition. If I may also add, as someone who has taken time to try and understand boxing and now Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and educate myself, the nuances, the detail, the discipline, the technique, the fitness, the flexibility, like you are watching, I call it the combat decathlon, the most rounded athletes in the world as far as I'm concerned.
It's obvious speaking to you, you're a fan, and maybe it's the sort of question you can't ask because but what fighters, who do you look at and go, oh man, I can't wait to see that? Is there a few fighters that really excite you?
Right now, obviously Conor McGregor for pure hype. Because I think he's the real deal, but he's also just you can't take your eyes off him. I've missed Kane. I just want to see him back in there because I look at the massive guys and you just think, what is separating Kane in quality to Overeem, to Struve, to Mitrione, to whoever else, I can't think, Rothwell, and I just want to see him back in there and refresh myself as to why he's that good. In I think it was WEC, the Pettis Henderson off the cage kick. I want to see Pettis do that again somehow. I also like the speed. So, hey, look, Demetrius Johnson, you're learning from still every time you watch him. But there was a great line about welterweights that they have more boom and zoom, or more zoom and boom. So the welterweight scene at the moment, again, Gunny's here fighting in Stockholm, but he's just got a weird style, that karate stand-up style that you think it's not going to happen for him, and well, so far it has. So those are exciting guys. Who else? Stacks.
I have to. Is there a fighter or a fight that you must visualize sort of the events you do? What's a fight that you'd pinch yourself being able to end in the blue corner? Is there a super fight you'd love?
That's a good question. For pure history, you've got to say a John Jones fight, because at the moment he's all over it. Anderson, whether he makes it back into contention for a title, but John Jones definitely. Who would be in the other corner? You've got to say it's Gustafsson. Yeah, and look, I want the European guys to win, I want the Brits to win, I want the English to win, if you take it down that way. But John Jones, you want to be able to look back and go,
I'm guessing, though, should Conor McGregor get his wish of a football stadium for the title? Is that yours?
It's mine.
Are you and Bruce going to have words over that one?
No, not at all. No, as far as I'm concerned. No, look, I'm contracted to European events.
Awesome.
If it's a title fight, the question is, do they take Conor to Vegas, where he's going to pay-per-view it? If he does, you're into Bruce country. If it comes to an island stadium, there is no way I'm not. In fact, Bruce, I'm calling you out. Okay, we'll do 3 rounds, catch weight. Look, I'd love to do that. And I think the other weird thing, we were talking about it a moment ago, I'm the last guy to leave after a stare down. I mean, how weird and exciting is that I stick my hand under a referee's armpit and watch 2 killers like stare at each other. That's just random. So, yeah.
I appreciate the fact you've given up some time, but I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and then we'll let you go. Obviously, you have a fairly young career in the UFC. What's the highlight for you at the moment? Was it the first time you got the call? Well, what's been your highlight in the young UFC career so far?
Dublin. I think up until Dublin, as a European unit, we were delivering good shows. Everyone was gradually working well together. You've got Dan Hardy and John Gooden who know the sport inside out. As a group, though, we were yet to do anything on a world stage that people kind of stood back and went, wow. Look, that's led by the Irish fans, it's led by Conor, but from a production point of view, everyone that night delivered. And, I think that was the point at which Dana and Lorenzo and the guys in Vegas maybe had an opportunity to say that was top 10 event ever.
Yeah, I know we had the Conor hype train and well deserved, but you also had Paddy Houlihan, you had Cahal, you had those 4 SBG Iron guys. Five. Yeah, you got to count Gunner as well. But the fans, do the UK fans? Because you've done. Do we need to learn a little bit from these guys?
I don't think so. I think Ireland has been slightly starved of good fighters, and they love fighting. So that was an opportunity for them to express ourselves. If you look at fighting in England, certainly, and I guess Scotland, you've got some cracking Scottish fighters who are boxers, which is why now they're maybe not so high up in the rankings. People want MMA because they know what it brings. I definitely don't think in England we're missing out. I think if you were at the O2, we had 16,000 people. It was a quick sellout. With respect to all of them there, we didn't have massive names on the card, but we had some good local guys. Alex was obviously just off the back of the John Jones. Jimmy Manua, unbeaten. He was 14-0 going into that, but if we can sell out 16,000 and make a big noise, the Swedes travel there, people want to come to London, we're there. I think that's what's exciting.
How much bigger can the UFC get in Europe? Is there more, there's been talk about UFC Italy, but that kind of disappeared and then comes back. Is it over the next, and maybe I'm asking the wrong guy, but do you figure over the next 3 years we're going to see an even bigger sort of growth in the number of countries that we hit in Europe, or are they going to keep it, UK, Sweden, Germany, Ireland?
So this is not the party line. This is not the UFC speaking, because I kind of hear things going on. But I think one's got to take a fairly smart view about the business of the UFC, which is London sells, Stockholm sells, Dublin sells, Abu Dhabi sells, Berlin sells, and that's 5. Why wouldn't you repeat them next year? And then on top of that, there's talk of, I'm not convinced, there's talk of Croatia, of Poland, of, obviously there's issues in Russia at the moment, but, there's no reason we couldn't do one a year in all of the countries who have an appetite and go to more countries.
So I asked Dan at the last press conference, I said, is there any danger that the UFC can plateau? Is there going to come a point where it has to plateau for a minute? Would you say that's a long way away, in your opinion, again?
I think if you take football, which is a massive sport, the biggest sport across Europe, the Champions League is, that's where they play for all the marbles. But the FA Cup and the Premier League and the Bundesliga and Serie A, and there's still a lot of amazing sport going on, and the top guys. So I don't see. There can only be only one champion. There's 8 weight divisions, and there'll be 2 in the women's. People love the sport. So sure, the big ones are the big ones, but the rest of the time, people want to see good fights, and we've got great fighters.
And I know you said just off camera you needed to get to a steam room and then go have a beer, and I can't say I blame you. But before we let you go, is there anybody that you'd like to say thank you to? Anybody you'd like to shout out? Whether it be family or friends that support you, or whoever. Family,
friends. Okay, so from here, Dan Hardy and John Gooden, who both have many more years in mixed martial arts than me, have been amazing, really. Very supportive, but also just, they know I know enough, but I'll never know enough compared to them, and so they've really helped me along. There's a guy called Dave Swan, who's a fighter on, I think he fought on another promotion. He had 10 fights and he's now a referee, and I call him...
MDK Swan, we know Dave, yeah.
There we go. So Dave, if you're watching, but he's my cultural attaché to mixed martial arts. So if I need a kind of, just to get my head around something particular, and he's, you know, I'm a utter novice, but we roll.
I gotta say, I've rolled a couple of times. Not well, though. Not well. Andy, I really appreciate you giving up some time. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to watch you work, and thank you again. And
keep promoting the sport. That's what it's all about.
We'll be coming back to you in a little while.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.